What would you sacrifice to keep your family whole? 4 sisters sit by the fire on a December evening knitting and complaining about poverty, about missing their father, about the thousand small injustices of being young and female in 1860s New England. They don't know it yet, but this is the last winter they'll all be together like this, still children, still unbroken by the world that waits beyond these walls. Jo sprawls on the rug, restless as always, her long legs tangled in her skirts. Meg sighs over her old dress, imagining silk she'll never own. Amy sniffs about fairness and the indignity of flat noses. And Beth, quiet, gentle Beth, says the one true thing: we've got father and mother and each other. It's enough. It won't always feel like enough. But right now, in the firelight, with the snow falling softly outside and the whole world held at bay, it is everything. Their father is far away, serving as a chaplain in the Civil War, too old to be drafted, too principled to stay home. His letter arrives that evening, and when Marmee reads it aloud, the room goes still. He doesn't write about hardship or the terrible things he's witnessed. He writes about love and duty and hoping to come home to find his little women braver and better than when he left. Every girl cries. Every girl makes a promise. To be less vain, less selfish, less wild, less afraid. They mean it completely, with all the fierce sincerity that only youth can muster. They'll break every promise before the week is out. Jo will lose her temper. Meg will envy her friends. Amy will be petty. Beth will be too afraid. That's not failure. That's what growing up looks like. The slow, humbling distance between who you want to be and who you are today. Christmas morning, and the first test comes fast. Marmee tells them about a family nearby, a mother with a newborn, 6 children huddled in one bed, no fire, no food. Will they give away their Christmas breakfast? They hesitate only a moment. The table is already set, the muffins warm, the cream pitcher full. Jo speaks first. I'm so glad you came before we began. They carry their food through the snowy streets in covered dishes, their breath rising in the cold air like small prayers. When they arrive at that cold, bare room, a woman weeps and calls them angels. It's the happiest breakfast they've ever had, though they don't eat a bite of it. They come home and make do with bread and milk, and not one of them complains. Generosity, they're learning, doesn't subtract from you. It multiplies what you have in ways that arithmetic cannot explain. That evening, the sisters performed their homemade play for a dozen friends, a melodramatic operatic tragedy Jo wrote herself, complete with cardboard swords, tinfoil armor, and a tower that collapses on the lovers mid-scene. It's absurd and wonderful, and entirely, gloriously their own creation. The audience shrieks with laughter when the bed they're sitting on folds up and swallows them whole. Jo struts about in her russet leather boots, dying with magnificent theatrical agony, rising again because the audience demands it. Then comes the real surprise. Old Mr. Lawrence next door has sent them a feast. Ice cream, cake, flowers, and bonbons. The girls have never met him, but his lonely grandson Laurie watched their fun from a window, pressed against the cold glass, and something about the warmth of this absurd, laughing, impoverished household made the old man generous. Jo notices the boy's face at the window and files it away. She's going to know him. She's going to drag him into their world, whether he likes it or not. New Year's Eve. A party at the Gardners'. Meg fits in easily. She's pretty. She knows the steps. She was made for this world of chandeliers and chatter. But Jo stands with her back to the wall, hiding the burn mark on her dress, feeling like a colt in a flower garden. Too tall, too loud, too everything. She slips behind a curtain to escape the dance floor, and finds she's not alone. The Lawrence boy is hiding there too, bashful, out of place, lonely in a way Jo recognizes instantly because it mirrors her own. They don't introduce themselves properly. They just start talking, and within minutes they're old friends, laughing about nothing, comparing their respective miseries with the easy honesty of people who have nothing to prove. I'm not Mr. Lawrence, he says. I'm only Laurie. I'm not Miss March, she answers. I'm only Jo. Some friendships begin with formality. The important ones begin with honesty. They dance in an empty hallway where no one can see Jo's burned dress or judge Laurie's shyness. He teaches her the German step. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and she picks it up with her usual fierce competence, stumbling only twice and laughing both times. She makes him laugh until the sadness leaves his face, until the loneliness he carries like a second skin begins, for the first time in months, to feel lighter. When Meg sprains her ankle and can't walk home, Laurie offers his grandfather's carriage without a moment's hesitation, not showing off his wealth, just being kind in the way that comes naturally to him. Riding home, Meg dreams of opera invitations and silk dresses. Jo dreams of adventures and stories and a world bigger than Concord. Beth and Amy wait up, demanding every detail. 2 little night-capped heads popping up in the dark. Tell about the party. Tell about the party. This is the last time their world will feel this small and safe. But the holidays end, and the burdens come back, heavier now, because the girls have tasted freedom and know what they're missing. Meg trudges to the king's house to mind their spoiled children, watching the older daughters in silk dresses float by like visions of the life she might have had, trying not to want what she can't have. Jo reports to Aunt March, a fussy old woman with a poodle and a parrot and opinions about everything, reading aloud from dull books until the old lady naps, then sneaking into the library to devour novels until the dreaded cry of "Josie Fine" drags her back to duty. Beth stays home with her broken dolls and her old piano that won't stay in tune, crying quietly when no one's watching because she doesn't want to burden anyone with her small sorrows. Amy goes to school in her cousin's ugly hand-me-downs, bearing the daily humiliation of flat noses and pickled limes. Each sister carries her burden differently, none of them carries it alone. In the garret, under the eaves where the rain drums like applause, Jo has built herself a world. An old sofa, a writing desk scarred with ink, a pet rat named Scrabble who sits on her shoulder while she works. This is where the stories live, the wild, fierce, improbable stories that pour out of her faster than her hand can move. Pirates and princesses, haunted castles and runaway brides, heroes who never wait for permission, and villains who get exactly what they deserve. She writes the way other people breathe, compulsively, desperately, as though the words will suffocate her if she doesn't let them out. Nobody in the family takes her writing seriously yet. Meg thinks it's charming. Amy thinks it's peculiar. Beth just likes hearing the stories read aloud. But Jo knows something none of them do. These pages are her ticket out. Not out of this family she loves, out of the smallness the world has planned for her. Jo decides she's going to befriend that lonely boy next door, whether he likes it or not. She spots him at a window, looking miserable with a cold, his face pressed against the glass like a prisoner watching the free world go by, and she pelts a snowball at the glass to get his attention. Within an hour she's in his room with kittens and blancmange, tidying his things and making him laugh until the color comes back to his face and the loneliness retreats to the corners of the room. Laurie confesses something that stops her cold. He watches the March family through their window at night, the fire and the lamplight and their mother's face. "I haven't got any mother, you know." The words drop like stones into still water. Jo doesn't flinch. She simply says, "We'll never draw that curtain anymore." And just like that, a lonely rich boy and a restless poor girl decide they belong to each other's world, not through formality or obligation, but through the simple recognition of a shared need. Then Jo meets the lion. Old Mr. Lawrence catches her admiring his portrait, and overhears her saying she likes him despite his grim mouth and tremendous will. She's mortified, caught speaking plainly about a man who terrifies the whole neighborhood. But the old man doesn't scold. He laughs, a deep bark of genuine delight. "You've got your grandfather's spirit," he tells her, and takes her arm for tea. He sees what Laurie needs, not more tutors or more books or the hollow company of paid companions, but this, the loud, honest warmth of the March sisters pouring into his grandson's quiet life like sunlight into a shuttered room. The hedge between the two houses will never be a real barrier again. Two families, one rich and lonely, the other poor and full of love, are about to discover that what each lacks is exactly what the other has to give. While Jo conquers the old man with bluntness, Beth conquers him with something quieter. She's terrified of Mr. Risset. Lawrence, his loud voice, his staring eyebrows, his habit of saying exactly what he thinks without warning. But she aches for his grand piano, the way a parched garden aches for rain, the way a caged bird aches for open sky. He notices. Of course he notices. He's lost a granddaughter himself and knows what longing looks like on a small face. Without making a fuss, he mentions to Jo that the piano suffers for want of use, and wouldn't some young person like to practice on it? No one need see or speak to anyone. Beth takes his hand and whispers, "Oh, sir, they do care very, very much." He looks down at her and something in him cracks open. An old wound, an old grief, a door he'd locked and thought he'd thrown away the key. "I had a little girl once, with eyes like these." He kisses her forehead and leaves quickly, before anyone can see what it costs him to remember. Days later, a little cabinet piano appears in the March parlor with a letter addressed to Miss Elizabeth March. Beth turns pale with shock and something that goes far beyond surprise. It's the look of someone who has received a grace they never dared to hope for. She can't speak, can't read the note. Jo has to do it for her, her voice breaking on every other word. The old man wrote that Beth's slippers reminded him of his lost granddaughter, and he wants Beth to have the piano that once belonged to that child. Beth does something no one expects, something so out of character that her sisters stare in wonder. She walks straight across the garden, through the hedge, into Mr. Lawrence's study, and puts both arms around his neck and kisses him. The crustiest man in the neighborhood melts completely. Love, it turns out, casts out fear, even Beth's fear, which has governed her whole small life until this moment. Every day now, Beth slips through the hedge and into the great house while Mr. Lawrence is away. She plays the grand piano with the soft pedal down, her small fingers finding melodies that the instrument seems to have been waiting years to remember. She dusts the keys before and after. She leaves fresh flowers on the old man's desk, never asking, never expecting thanks, just offering quiet beauty the way a bird offers its song. When Mr. Lawrence returns and finds the flowers, he says nothing. But the household notices that his temper has softened, that he hums at breakfast, that he stands sometimes at the drawing-room door listening to music that isn't there. Beth is healing him without knowing it, filling the silence left by a granddaughter who died years ago, whose little shoes still sit in a closet upstairs. Two wounded hearts mending each other through music and flowers and the stubborn, wordless persistence of kindness. Amy's trials are smaller but no less real to her. At school, pickled limes are currency. You owe them, you trade them, you display them as proof of status, and woe to the girl who has none. Amy buys 24 with her last quarter, and for one glorious morning she's queen of her little world, dispensing limes like a duchess dispensing favors. Then a jealous classmate tells the teacher, and Mr. Davis makes Amy throw every lime out the window while the street children cheer below. That's humiliating enough, standing before the whole class, watching her treasure rain down to strangers. But then he does something Amy has never experienced. He strikes her hand with a ruler. It isn't the pain, though the pain is real enough. It's the shock of being hit for the first time in her life, the discovery that the world can touch you like that, without your permission, without your consent, and there is nothing you can do but bear it. Amy burns Joe's manuscript. Not a page, not a chapter, the entire book. Fairy tales Joe had written and rewritten over years, labored over in the garret with frozen fingers and an ink-stained soul, just copied out in her best hand, the old drafts already destroyed. Amy did it to punish Joe for not taking her to the theater, and when she confesses with tears and terror in her face, something in Joe snaps, something fundamental, something she has been holding back her entire life. She shakes her little sister until Amy's teeth chatter. She says words she can't take back. I'll never forgive you as long as I live. That night the family sings together, but Joe's voice is silent and the music sounds wrong without her, like a chord with a missing note. Marmee whispers, "Don't let the sun go down upon your anger." Joe wants to collapse into her mother's arms, but she can't. Not yet. Her pride won't let her. Anger, she's discovering, is easier to hold than to release. The next day, still unforgiven, Joe goes skating with Laurie. Amy follows, desperate to make peace, calling after them with a voice that gets smaller and smaller as the distance grows. Joe sees her coming and turns her back. Laurie shouts from ahead, "Keep near the shore, it isn't safe in the middles." But Amy doesn't hear, or doesn't understand, or doesn't care enough to obey. And Joe knows Amy doesn't hear. A voice inside says, "Let her take care of herself." For one terrible moment Joe does nothing. Then the crack, sharp as a gunshot, the splash, a little blue hood above black water, small hands clawing at breaking ice. Joe's voice is gone, her legs won't move. Laurie flies past her, flat on the ice, reaching down into dark water, holding Amy up by his arm while the cold tries to drag them both under. They pull her out, soaked, shivering, blue-lipped, but alive. Joe carries the weight of that frozen second for the rest of her life. She almost let her sister drown because she wouldn't let go of her anger. That night, with Amy safe and sleeping and the house restored to its fragile peace, Marmee binds Joe's cut hands and listens as her daughter falls apart. "Mother, if she should die, it would be my fault." And then, quieter, rawer, "It's my dreadful temper. I'm afraid I shall do something terrible some day and spoil my life, and make everybody hate me. What Marmee says next changes everything. I am angry nearly every day of my life, Joe. But I have learned not to show it, and I still hope to learn not to feel it, though it may take another 40 years to do so." Joe stares. Her mother, calm, steady, infinitely patient Marmee, fights the same demon? The same fire that burns in Joe's chest until she wants to break things? 40 years of trying. Not perfection, never perfection, but persistence, the slow and stubborn work of becoming better than the person you were yesterday. Joe holds her mother close and says nothing, because the prayer she's making has no words. Spring arrives, and Meg gets her first taste of the world she longs for. 2 weeks at the Moffats' house, fine clothes, parties, carriages, gossip, and the slow, seductive education of wanting things you cannot have. At the big party they dress her up like a doll, crimped hair, low-necked blue silk, silver jewelry, rouge on her lips. She looks in the mirror and sees a stranger, beautiful, fashionable, and completely unlike the modest girl she was raised to be. Laurie arrives and can barely look at her, his disapproval written across his honest face. "I don't like fuss and feathers," he says bluntly, and it stings because it's true. She overhears gossip in the hallway that Mrs. Pear. March must have plans to match her pretty daughters with the Lawrence fortune. The ugly words follow Meg home like a shadow she cannot outrun, spoiling the innocent friendship she never thought to question, and staining a kindness she had taken for granted. Home again, Meg confesses to Marmee. The champagne, the flirting, the borrowed dress, the way she let them paint her face and lower her neckline and turn her into someone she barely recognized, all of it. And the gossip, that Mrs. March must have plans to match her daughters with the Lawrence fortune. Marmee listens without judgment, her hands steady, her eyes warm, and then she speaks the words her daughters will carry with them forever. "I'd rather see you poor men's wives if you were happy, beloved, contented, than queens on thrones." Without self-respect and peace, she doesn't forbid ambition. She doesn't shame desire. She simply asks the question that matters: what kind of richness do you want? Jo sits beside them, watching her older sister with new and troubled eyes. For the first time, she sees Meg drifting toward a world she can't follow. The world of grown-up wants and adult choices and compromises with reality, and it frightens her more than any adventure ever could. The girls form a secret society, the Pickwick Club, with Jo as president, and they publish their own newspaper, the Pickwick Portfolio, filled with stories, poems, advertisements, and moral essays written in their best handwriting. Jo's contributions are sensational, full of tragedy and romance. Meg writes sentimental fiction about women who marry wealthy men and regret nothing. Beth contributes gentle animal tales. Amy draws the illustrations and complains about everyone else's spelling. When Laurie discovers the club, he begs to join, and they admit him as Sam Weller, on condition that he provide a private post office in the hedge between their houses. The old hollow pillar becomes their mailbox, notes, gifts, small kindnesses passing back and forth in secret, connecting two households through a crumbling column no wider than a hat-box. It's a child's game, but it teaches them something real. That community is built not by grand declarations, but by small, daily acts of reaching across the distance. Summer, and the girls declare a holiday from duty. No chores, no lessons, no obligations, just pleasure and freedom and the right to do exactly as they please. It lasts 3 days before everything falls apart. The house descends into chaos. Dishes pile up. Tempers fray. The garden wilts. Beth forgets to feed her canary, and Pip dies in his cage, stiff and cold, his little claws stretched out in silent accusation. Beth is devastated. She wraps the tiny body in cotton and buries it in the garden, and her tears fall on the grave of a bird who died because someone forgot to care. Marmee says nothing. She simply disappears for a day. No breakfast made, no problem solved, no motherly hand steering them right. By Saturday they're begging for their burdens back. Lounging and larking doesn't pay, Jo admits with characteristic bluntness. The experiment proves what Marmee already knew. Purpose isn't the opposite of freedom. It's the thing that makes freedom bearable. Marmee's lessons never come as lectures. They come disguised as stories, questions, gentle observations dropped at exactly the right moment. When Jo rages, Marmee doesn't say calm down. She says, "I am angry nearly every day of my life, and the shock of that confession does more than any command ever could." When Meg envies her rich friends, Marmee doesn't forbid desire. She asks what kind of richness matters. When Amy struggles with vanity, Marmee gives her a turquoise ring and tells her to touch it whenever she's tempted to be selfish. Each daughter gets a different medicine because Marmee understands that each daughter carries a different wound. She is not a perfect mother. She admits this freely. She is a mother who has learned, through 40 years of battling her own temper and her own ambitions, that the only thing you can truly give your children is the honest example of someone trying to be better. Not perfection. Persistence. But summer brings joy, too. Great, sprawling, golden joy that tastes of lemonade and river water and croquet balls clicking on the green. A picnic at Longmeadow, the whole crew rowing up the river, a tent pitched under the oaks, games on the lawn until the shadows grow long. Jo wears a ridiculous oversized hat Laurie sent as a joke, and she wears it proudly, as if it were a crown. When an English boy named Fred cheats at croquet, Jo's temper flares white-hot. But this time she walks away, hides among the nettles until the rage cools, then returns to win the game fairly. Yankees have a trick of being generous to their enemies, she says, and lets his ball stand. Laurie whispers, "Good for you, Jo." Meg watches quietly and says with a warmth that makes Jo's eyes sting, "It was dreadfully provoking, but you kept your temper, and I'm so glad, Jo." Progress. Not perfection, but progress. A warm September afternoon on the Delectable Mountain, their name for the pine-covered hill where they carry their work and play at being pilgrims. Laurie finds them there, and the conversation turns to dreams. "What do you want your life to be?" Meg wants a lovely house, pleasant people, heaps of money, and blushes when Laurie asks if she doesn't also want a husband. Jo wants books and fame, something splendid that won't be forgotten after I'm dead. Amy wants Rome, and to be the best artist in the whole world. And Beth? Beth just wants to stay home safe with father and mother. "Nothing else?" asks Laurie, and she shakes her head. "Since I had my little piano, I am perfectly satisfied. They plan to meet in 10 years to see whose castles came true." They don't know yet how cruel the arithmetic of dreams can be. Before the triumph comes the rejection. Jo sends her first story to a newspaper and gets it back with a printed slip not suited to our publication. She reads it 3 times, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something kinder. Then she folds the slip very small, tucks it into her writing desk alongside the manuscript, and sits perfectly still for 10 minutes. She doesn't cry, she's too proud for that. She doesn't tell anyone, she's too ashamed. Instead, she pulls out a fresh sheet of paper and starts writing something new, something better, something angrier. The rejection burns in her chest like a coal, and she feeds it to her pen, letting it fuel the very thing it tried to destroy. Years later, when she's famous and journalists ask her the secret of her persistence, she'll think of this moment. The quiet afternoon when she learned that the opposite of failure isn't success, it's continuing. Jo has been hiding in the garret for weeks, scribbling in secret, and now she sneaks into the city with a manuscript tucked under her arm. She paces outside a newspaper office 3 times before she dares climb the stairs, and a certain black-eyed boy watches from across the street, waiting to help if she needs it. She doesn't. When the editor accepts 2 stories for publication, Jo comes racing home and Laurie chases her into Amy's bower, where she shows him the paper with Miss Josephine March printed right there in black and white. She reads the story aloud to her sisters, pretending it's by a stranger. Beth guesses first. "Your sister!" cries, and the house erupts. She laughs with tears in her eyes. Because to be independent and earn the praise of those she loved were the dearest wishes of her heart, and this seemed to be the first step. November. A telegram arrives. Those horrid telegraph things, as Hannah calls them, and the words hit Marmee like a bullet fired from across a continent. "Your husband is very ill. Come at once." The room goes silent. The world outside darkens as if the weather itself knows what has happened. In an instant, the little household that ran on songs and squabbles and burnt puddings becomes something else entirely, a field hospital of the heart, mobilizing for a war they cannot fight. Marmee finds her voice first. "I shall go at once, but it may be too late." "Oh, children, children, help me to bear it!" Everyone scatters. Laurie rides through the cold for money. Mr. Brooke offers himself as escort, quiet and steady as a stone wall. And Jo tears through the house trying to do something, anything, because standing still means feeling, and feeling means drowning in a grief she has no practice for. Jo comes home late that afternoon with a strange expression on her face and a roll of bills clenched in her hand. $25, a fortune for the March family. "Where did you get it?" asks Marmee, half afraid of the answer. "I didn't beg, borrow, or steal it. I earned it. I only sold what was my own." She takes off her bonnet and the room gasps. Her hair, her one beauty, that thick chestnut mane that fell past her shoulders and caught the firelight like burnished copper, is gone, cropped short as a boy's. Everyone cries out, "Your beautiful hair!" Jo shrugs it off with the brisk practicality that is her armor against the world, says it'll grow back, says it doesn't matter, says $25 is $25. That night she means every word. But later, in the dark, when she thinks Meg is asleep, Meg hears a stifled sob from the next pillow. "Are you crying about father?" "No, not now." "What then?" My hair." It's the most honest moment in the book. She'd do it again tomorrow, and it still breaks her heart. Before dawn, Marmee moves through the house like a ghost, smoothing coverlets, kissing each sleeping face, praying prayers that only mothers know, the wordless. Desperate petitions of a woman who must leave her children behind, to go to a husband who may already be beyond her reach. In the gray morning light, the girls see her off bravely. No tears, as they promised, though the effort costs each of them everything. Mr. Brooke stands ready at the carriage, solid and kind, and the girls christen him Mr. Greatheart, because he is willing to walk through the valley of the shadow for their mother's sake. As the carriage rolls away, the sun breaks through the clouds, and the last thing Marmee sees is 4 bright faces at the gate. Brave, terrified, impossibly young, with old Mr. Plain, Lawrence, faithful Hannah, and devoted Laurie standing guard behind them. Then the carriage turns the corner, and the children are on their own. With Marmee gone, the girls try to carry on. They make schedules and assign duties and promise each other they'll be brave and good and everything their mother would want. But one duty keeps falling through the cracks, visiting the Hummels, the poor immigrant family their mother watches over. Meg is too tired from minding the house. Jo has a cold she can't shake. Amy can't be bothered with charity when there's real worry closer to home. Only Beth goes. Every day, alone, carrying food and medicine and the quiet comfort of her presence, until the afternoon she comes home and shuts herself in Marmy's room. Jo finds her sitting on the medicine chest with red eyes and a camphor bottle, and the look on Beth's face stops her heart. "You've had the scarlet fever, haven't you?" Jo's blood runs cold. "The baby's dead." "It died in my lap before she got home." The doctor had said scarlet fever, and Beth had been holding that dying child against her chest. She caught it because no one else would go. She caught it because she was faithful when her sisters were not. The house becomes a hospital. Hannah boils sheets and brews remedies from old receipts. Jo appoints herself head nurse and refuses to leave Beth's side, sleeping on the floor beside the bed, waking every time the small voice murmurs for water. Meg writes cheerful letters to Marmee that are all lies. Beth is mending nicely, don't worry, the doctor says she'll be fine, while her hands tremble so badly the pen skips. Amy is sent to Aunt March's house for safety, and the exile feels like punishment. She kneels by Aunt March's enormous bed and prays with a fervor that surprises even herself, bargaining with God, offering everything she has, promising to be good forever if only Beth will live. The house is too quiet without all four of them. The piano sits silent. The fire burns low, and Jo, washing Beth's fever-hot face at 3 a.m, whispers the same words over and over, "Please, please, please." The fever takes Beth down, down, down. She stops recognizing faces. She plays invisible piano keys on her coverlet with wasted fingers. She calls for her mother in a voice so broken it doesn't sound human. Jo never leaves the room. Meg keeps a telegram in her desk, ready to send. From Washington comes worse news. Father has relapsed. How dark the days are now. Jo gropes for God and can't find him. She stretches out her hand in the hallway, blind with tears, and Laurie catches it. "I'm here. Hold on to me, Jo dear." He can't promise anything. He just holds her hand and strokes her hair the way her mother used to, and somehow it's enough to keep her standing. Then he tells her what he's done. He's already telegraphed from Marmee, on his own authority, because Hannah's stubbornness be damned. She'll be here tonight. Jo throws her arms around his neck and sobs with gratitude. Some people show love with words. Laurie shows it by doing the thing you need before you know to ask. Midnight. The doctor has said, some change, for better or worse, will come before morning. Meg and Jo sit on either side of Beth's bed, not sleeping, barely breathing. "If God spares Beth, I never will complain again," whispers Meg. "If God spares Beth, I'll try to love and serve him all my life," answers Jo. The clock ticks. The snow falls. Hannah sleeps. Mr. Lawrence paces the parlor below, too old for this kind of grief again. Then, past 2 a.m. Jo sees Meg fall to her knees. A dreadful fear passes through her. Beth is dead. She rushes to the bed and sees the face changed. Peaceful, still, the fever flush gone. She kisses her sister's damp forehead and whispers, "Goodbye, my Beth." And then Hannah wakes, checks the child's pulse, and throws her apron over her face, rocking and crying. "The fever's turned. She's sleeping natural. Praise be given." The sun rises on a white, dazzling world, and from downstairs Laurie's voice, joyful as bells, "Girls, she's come, she's come." Christmas again. But what a different one from last year's. Beth lies on the study sofa in a new crimson wrapper, still pale, still fragile, but alive, which is more than they dared hope for when the fever was at its worst. Jo and Laurie have built a snow maiden in the garden crowned with holly, bearing fruit and flowers and new music in her icy arms. Then Laurie opens the parlor door, breathless with a secret he can barely contain. Here's another Christmas present for the March family. And there, muffled to the eyes, leaning heavily on Mr. Brooks' arm, stands their father. Thin, gray, changed by illness and war, but home. The stampede is instant and total. Jo nearly faints. Amy tumbles over a stool and hugs his boots. Mr. Brooke kisses Meg by mistake, or so he claims. And Beth, too weak to wait her turn, appears at the study door in her little red wrapper, and joy gives strength to her feeble limbs. She runs straight into his arms. "I've got you safe, my Beth, and I'll keep you so. Please, God." Beth recovers, but she doesn't come all the way back. The fever left something broken that no doctor can name and no medicine can fix. She is thinner now, quieter, with shadows under her eyes that never quite disappear. She doesn't complain. Beth has never complained about anything in her life, but she tires more easily, and sometimes Jo catches her sitting very still with one hand pressed to her heart, as if listening to something the rest of them cannot hear. The family pretends not to notice. They wrap her in crimson shawls and seat her by the fire and surround her with love so fierce it borders on desperation. Mr. Lawrence sends fruit and flowers every week. Laurie carries her up and down stairs when she's too tired to walk. And Jo watches all of it with a growing dread she cannot name. The slow, terrible suspicion that the girl who came back from the fever is not quite the same girl who went in, and that the difference will only widen with time. That evening, by the fire, their father reads each daughter like a book, and what he sees moves him to tears he doesn't shed. He takes Meg's roughened hands, scarred with burns and needle pricks, and tells her they're more beautiful than the white ones she once pampered. He looks at Jo, no longer bouncing and whistling, but quieter, gentler, her thin face pale from weeks of nursing, and says he can't find anything beautiful enough to match the $25 his good girl sent him. He holds Beth close, afraid to say too much, because there's so little of her now. And Amy who took drumsticks at dinner and ran errands without being asked. He sees the turquoise ring she wears and says nothing, because she's already learned the lesson it was meant to teach. Beth goes to her little piano and sings the shepherd boy's hymn, "He that is down need fear no fall." It is, they all agree, a singularly fitting song for her. And then the thing Jo dreaded most happens. Not with a bang, but with an umbrella. John Brooke comes to collect it and finds himself alone with Meg. She's rehearsed her rejection speech perfectly. "Thank you, mister." "Brooke, you are very kind, but I am too young." She delivers it almost word for word. But then Aunt March barges in and orders Meg not to marry that penniless nobody, and the perverse magic of being told you can't have something makes you want it desperately. "I shall marry whom I please, Aunt March." The old lady storms out, and Brooke, who's been listening from the study, walks in and says quietly, "Thank you for defending me." Meg whispers, "Yes, John," and Jo, coming downstairs expecting triumph, finds her strong-minded sister sitting on the enemy's knee. She flees to the garret and cries into the rats, "Oh, do somebody go down quick! John Brooke is acting dreadfully, and Meg likes it." Part 1 ends as it began, by the fire, together. But the first crack in the family has appeared, and nothing will be quite the same. The engagement unfurls slowly through the household like a flag in uncertain wind. John Brooke is steady, kind, hard-working, and completely without fortune, which is exactly what makes Jo furious and Marmee proud. Laurie teases mercilessly, sending fake love letters that nearly cause an international incident. Aunt March threatens to cut Meg off without a penny, then sends a ring anyway because she can't help herself. And Jo? Jo, who swore she'd never let anyone steal her sisters, watches Meg sew her trousseau with a mixture of love and loss that she can't untangle. She helps hem the wedding dress at midnight, her stitches crooked because she can't see through the tears she won't admit are falling. "I knew it would happen," she tells Laurie, sitting on the garden wall in the dark. "I just didn't know it would hurt this much." He just sits beside her and lets the silence hold what words cannot. 3 years pass. The war ends. Father comes home for good. And on a June morning, bright with roses, Meg March becomes Meg Brooke. No silk, no lace, no orange flowers, just a dress she sewed herself and lilies of the valley in her hair, because they're John's favorites. Her father's voice breaks during the service. Jo doesn't cry, though she comes close, saved only by Laurie's comical face across the room. After the ceremony, Laurie gets everyone dancing on the lawn. Married couples in the inner ring, bachelors and spinsters prancing around the outside, and even Aunt March tucks her cane under her arm and hops along. As Meg walks to her new little house on John's arm, flowers in her hands, June sunshine on her face, Jo stands watching with Laurie. "It never can be the same again," she says. "I've lost my dearest friend." "You've got me anyhow," Laurie answers. "I'll stand by you, Jo, all the days of my life." He means it, and the curtain falls on Act 1. Part 2 opens on a changed world. 3 years older, the sisters scatter into separate ambitions, and Amy's are the most deliciously doomed. She casts her own foot in plaster and has to be chiseled free. She catches colds sketching mushrooms in wet grass. And when she finally throws a grand luncheon for her elegant drawing class friends, French chocolate, ice cream, a borrowed carriage, not a single girl comes. Rain on Monday, excuses on Tuesday. The entire March family sits down to eat a feast meant for 12. Amy bears it with trembling dignity. "I've done what I undertook, and it's not my fault that it failed." Then she packs the leftovers into a basket and sends them to the Hummels, because waste is worse than humiliation. Laurie's birthday gift arrives weeks later, a tiny coral lobster on a charm. She doesn't throw it at him, she wears it. Jo's first real triumph arrives in an envelope, not a slim rejection slip this time, but a thick letter with a check folded inside. $100 for a sensational story, full of duels and elopements and an earthquake for a finale that shakes the villain into repentance. She didn't write it because it was good. She wrote it because it paid, and because her family needed what money could buy. And the money doesn't go to new dresses or books or the 100 small luxuries Jo has denied herself for years. It goes straight to the sea. Beth and Marmee get a month at the shore, salt air and sunshine and rest, because Jo's pen can buy what her hands and her prayers can't fix. Beth comes home still too thin, still too pale, but better. And Jo, tasting power for the first time, falls into the writing life with a fury that frightens and delights her. The Duke's daughter pays the butcher. A Phantom Hands buys new carpet. The Curse of the Coventrys puts groceries on the table. She is learning that money earned by your own brain tastes different from money given. Sharper, sweeter, entirely your own. Success has a price Jo didn't anticipate. The sensational stories pay well. Duels, poisonings, passionate revenge, women with daggers hidden in their bodices, and the money is intoxicating. But each story pulls her further from the truth. She writes what sells, not what she feels. She invents characters with no resemblance to anyone she knows, and the writing comes too easily, slick and hollow and perfectly crafted to excite. Professor Bear hasn't arrived in her life yet, but something inside her already knows the difference between the stories she writes for money and the stories she was born to tell. Late at night, after finishing another potboiler about a duke's stolen diamonds, she opens her drawer and looks at the notebooks from her childhood. The Pickwick portfolio, the fairy tales Amy burned, the plays she wrote for 4 girls and a cardboard stage. Those stories were terrible. Those stories were true. She closes the drawer and stares at the ceiling and wonders when she became so skilled at writing about everything except what matters. Then comes the novel, her real one, the book she's been carrying inside her for years, and the family council that decides its fate. Father says wait, Mother says try. Meg says don't cut a word. Amy says get the money and never mind the critics. And Beth. Beth says quietly, I should so like to see it printed soon, with an emphasis on soon that chills Jo's heart for reasons she can't name and doesn't want to examine too closely. So Jo chops and trims and takes everyone's contradictory advice until her book is a picked robin sent shivering into the cold. The reviews are maddening. One calls it exquisite, another dangerous. A third insists she had a deep theory when she had none at all. The parts copied faithfully from life are called impossible and absurd, and the scenes she invented out of whole cloth are praised as charmingly natural. Jo laughs, cries, and resolves to try again. Not being a genius, like Keats, it won't kill me, only make me work harder. Meanwhile, in Meg's little house, the jelly won't gel. She's been at it all day, boiling, straining, reboiling, and the stuff runs like water. The kitchen is a wreck, her hair is in her eyes. And that's when John brings a friend home for dinner. There is no dinner. There is only a wife sobbing in her pinafore and a floor swimming with currant juice. The jelly won't gel, and I don't know what to do. John laughs, the one thing he should not have done, and Meg slams the door in his face and retreats to cry. They spend the evening in separate rooms, both calm and firm, both desperately miserable. It takes Marmee's words echoing in Meg's memory. Be the first to ask pardon, before she crosses the room and kisses his forehead. And that, of course, settles everything. The sweetest jelly they ever made was preserved in that little family jar. Marriage, Meg discovers, is not the fairy tale she imagined at the Moffats' ball. It's burnt porridge and leaking roofs and learning that the man you love snores and leaves his boots in the hallway and sometimes comes home too tired to talk. It's discovering that love doesn't exempt you from loneliness, that you can lie beside someone in the dark and feel the whole width of the world between you. But it's also this, John bringing home a single rose on a Tuesday for no reason. John reading aloud by the fire while she knits. John standing in the doorway watching their babies sleep with an expression so tender it makes her chest ache. The grand passions of her girlhood novels are nowhere to be found. What she has instead is better and harder and more real, a love that shows up every morning, picks up its tools and goes to work. The dove nest is small and imperfect and entirely their own, and Meg wouldn't trade it for the finest mansion on the hill. Meg learns harder lessons too, that wanting what Sally Moffat has can poison what you already love. She buys $50 of violet silk she can't afford, and when John finds the empty household fund, she says the worst thing a wife can say to a man who works himself thin, I'm tired of being poor. He doesn't shout. He says quietly, I was afraid of this. I do my best, Meg. She finds him later cancelling his new winter coat. I can't afford it, my dears, and cries into the old one until it's soaked. But the hard season passes, and midsummer brings its reward. Laurie barges into the kitchen, and Jo presents him with a flannel bundle. Shut your eyes and hold out your arms. She gives him 2 babies instead of 1. Twins. Daisy and Demi, and the expression on Laurie's face as he holds them is worth every spilled pot of jelly in the world. Amy's education continues. Not in art, but in grace. When the Chester girls steal her table at the charity fair, she swallows her fury and takes the rejected flower table without a scene. She gives her best work back to Maychester's display, unprompted, because a verse in her own illuminated book tells her to love her neighbor. The flower table wilts. The art table thrives. Amy sits alone in her corner all day and doesn't complain. But Jo and Laurie rally. Flowers from the Lawrence gardens, college boys buying every bouquet, and by evening Amy's corner is the liveliest spot in the room. Jo watches her little sister's quiet courage and says something she's never said before. "You've a deal more principle and generosity than I ever gave you credit for." Amy has learned the hardest lesson of all, that being a true gentlewoman has nothing to do with French boots and everything to do with how you behave when no one is watching. In Europe, Amy blooms. She copies old masters in the Louvre, sketches Roman ruins at sunset, attends salons where artists argue about light and shadow until dawn. She has talent, everyone says so. But standing before a Raphael in Florence, something cracks inside her. She sees the distance between what she can do and what genius does, and it is an ocean she will never cross. The realization doesn't destroy her. It transforms her. If she cannot be a great artist, she can be a great woman, one who brings beauty and grace into everything she touches, who makes the lives around her more elegant, more thoughtful, more complete. She puts away her brushes without bitterness and picks up something harder, the work of becoming herself. Laurie, lost and drinking his way through Nice after Jo's rejection, barely recognizes the composed young woman who sits beside him at dinner and says quietly, "I despise you. Wake up and deserve to live." The consequence arrives in a letter, and it's a knife. Aunt Carol is going to Europe, and she's taking Amy, not Jo. Jo can't believe it. She was first. She wanted it most. She's worked harder. But then Marmee reads the letter aloud. "I planned at first to ask Jo, but as favors burden her, and she hates French, I think I won't venture." Every word is something Jo actually said. At Aunt March's house, with her nose in the air and her revolutionary opinions flying, her own tongue has robbed her of the thing she wanted most. "Oh, my tongue, my abominable tongue!" she cries into a pincushion while Beth clings to her and whispers, "I'm very selfish, but I couldn't spare you." When Amy's steamer pulls away, it's Laurie who stands on the dock beside her. "Take care of them for me," he promises. And Jo watches from the garret window as the last flutter of blue ribbon disappears and thinks, everyone is leaving, everyone is growing up, and she is being left behind. Laurie asks Jo to marry him on a golden afternoon by the river, and she says no. She says it gently, firmly, with a pain in her voice that surprises them both. "I don't believe I shall ever marry. I'm happy as I am, and love my liberty too well to be in any hurry to give it up." He argues, he pleads, he says he'll die without her, which is the one thing he should not say, because Jo March does not believe that any woman should be responsible for keeping a man alive. She loves him entirely. She will not marry him. Not because she doesn't care, but because she knows herself well enough to understand that the love she has for Laurie is the love of a twin soul, a fellow rebel, a brother in arms. And marrying it would ruin the best friendship either of them will ever have. He storms away. She goes to her room and cries into her pillow. And neither of them knows yet that the rejection that feels like an ending is actually the beginning of something better for both of them. After Jo's rejection, Laurie unravels. His grandfather sends him to Europe hoping travel will cure what ails him, but Laurie carries his grief like luggage. It goes wherever he goes. In Nice he smokes too much, drinks too much, plays at being a bohemian artist without producing any art. He grows a mustache he doesn't need and affects a world-weary cynicism that fools no one. Amy finds him there and refuses to play along. She sees through the pose to the wounded boy underneath, and she doesn't comfort him. She challenges him. "You've been lazy, selfish, and unkind. You've wasted the talents God gave you and broken the heart of the best friend you'll ever have." It stings because it's Amy, who was once the silly little sister, now speaking with a clarity that cuts through every pretense. Laurie looks at her, really looks, and for the first time in months sees something besides his own reflection. He begins, slowly, to wake up. One evening Jo catches Beth watching Laurie from the window, the way she leans forward when he passes, the way she smiles, the way a tear sits shining on the sill after he's gone. Jo's heart stops. She thinks she understands. Beth loves Laurie. What she doesn't understand, what she won't understand for a long time, is that Beth's tears aren't for love. They're for something far worse. That night Beth sobs in the dark and puts one hand over her heart. "Is it the old pain, my precious?" asks Jo. "No, it's a new one. But I can bear it." Jo holds her sister and strokes her hair, and in the silence makes a decision she must leave. If Beth loves Laurie, then Jo is in the way. She'll go to New York, take a teaching post, and give her sister room. It's the right decision for the wrong reason, but it will change everything. Beth has known for a long time, She's known since the autumn when the leaves fell and her strength fell with them, since the afternoon she sat at her piano and couldn't press the keys hard enough to make a sound. The scarlet fever didn't just pass through her, it stayed, like a guest who moves in quietly and refuses to leave. She tells Joe on a winter evening, sitting by the fire with her knitting in her lap and her eyes very calm. "I'm not like the rest of you. I never made any plans about what I'd do when I grew up. I never thought of being married as you all did. I couldn't seem to imagine myself anything but stupid little Beth, trotting about at home." Joe tries to speak and can't. "I have a feeling that it was never intended I should live long," Beth continues. "I'm not afraid, but it seems as if I should be homesick for you even in heaven. It's the bravest thing anyone in this family has ever said. Spring comes, but not for Beth. She goes quietly, the way she lived, without fuss, without drama, with her family around her and the morning sun on her face. In the last weeks, Joe never leaves her side. She carries her to the window to feel the sun. She reads aloud from Pilgrim's Progress, the part about crossing the river, the part about the city beyond. Beth's needle still moves through her work, stitching small things for the people she loves, until her fingers can't hold the needle anymore, and Joe takes it gently from her hand. The last morning is very still. Beth opens her eyes, looks at each face surrounding her, mother, father, sisters, and whispers something that might be, "I love you," or might be nothing at all. Then she turns her head toward the window where the first birds are singing, and she is gone. The tide went out so quietly that no one could say the exact moment it happened. Joe feels as if part of her own body has been removed, the gentlest, best part. And there is a space now where Beth used to be that will never, ever be filled. New York is loud and strange, and exactly what Joe needs. She teaches 2 little girls, writes in a sky parlor with a stove and a sunny window, and tries not to miss home too much. And then she meets Professor Byer. He's not handsome, stout, rumpled, ink-stained, with a bushy beard and clothes that need mending. But the first thing she sees him do is carry a coal, haud up 3 flights of stairs for a servant girl too small for the weight, and say kindly, "It goes better so." The little back is too young to have such heaviness. She peeps through a glass door and watches him teach, patient with stupid students, fierce with his grammar, tender with little Tina who rides his back like an elephant. She mends his socks in secret. He catches her, and instead of embarrassment offers German lessons in trade. They read fairy tales together, Hans Andersen and the Constant Tin Soldier, and Joe finds herself laughing in a way she hasn't laughed since home. He gives her Shakespeare for Christmas, inscribed from my friend Friedrich Byer. She writes to Beth, "I never knew how much there was in Shakespeare before, but then I never had a Byer to explain it to me." She doesn't know it yet. But the reader does. Professor Byer does something no one else has dared to do. He tells Joe the truth about her writing. Not cruelly, he's too kind for cruelty, but honestly, in the way of someone who respects her too much to lie. Over dinner one evening he speaks about sensational literature with quiet sadness, never mentioning Joe's work by name, never pointing a finger. But she understands. She goes home and reads her own stories with new eyes, and for the first time sees what he sees, the cheap tricks, the false emotions, the calculated titillation dressed up as drama. She burns the whole stack. It feels like cutting off her hair again, sacrificing something she's proud of because something truer demands it. When she tells him what she's done, he takes both her hands and says, "I have a great respect, and a little wish to say something. You have heart and talent. Do not write for money alone. Write the truth." She wants to cry. She wants to argue. Instead she nods and starts over. It happens in Rome, among ruins older than any heartbreak. Amy and Laurie have been circling each other for weeks, picnics at the Colosseum, sketching sessions in the Borghese Gardens, long walks where they talk about everything except what's growing between them. Amy is not Joe. She doesn't storm or argue or set the world on fire. She is steady and clear-eyed and knows exactly what she wants. And what she wants, she's discovered with a mix of terror and delight, is this rumpled, reformed, newly serious young man who once threw snowballs at her window and laughed when she fell through the ice. Laurie proposes not with grand speeches, but with honesty. "I've tried to please you. I want to go on trying for the rest of my life." Amy says yes with her whole heart, knowing that she is not Joe's replacement, but Laurie's completion, the calm harbor he didn't know he was sailing toward. The telegram arrives in Concord, Amy and Laurie married. Joe reads it twice, and then she smiles, a real smile, free of jealousy, full of grace. Everyone has someone now. Meg has John and the twins, Amy has Laurie, Beth has heaven, and Joe has, what? A half-finished novel and an empty garret and a mother who watches her with worried eyes. She's 25. She turned down the only man who ever asked her. Her best friend is married to her youngest sister. Her gentlest sister is dead. The writing that once poured out of her like a river has slowed to a trickle, then stopped entirely. For the first time in her life, Jo March doesn't know what to do next. She walks the hills where they used to dream their castles in the air, and the castles are all built now, just not hers. Women have minds and souls as well as just hearts, she tells Marmee one evening, and they've got ambition and talent as well as just beauty. I'm so sick of people saying that love is all a woman is fit for. But in the silence that follows, she wonders if she's protesting too much, if the life she chose is as full as she pretends. He comes in the rain. Of course he comes in the rain. This rumpled, wonderful man with his battered umbrella and his pockets full of gifts for the children, and his heart full of something he's been carrying across an ocean. Jo sees him from the window, and her whole body goes still. He's come to say goodbye, he says. He's going west to teach at a small college, and he couldn't leave without seeing her one more time. They walk together in the downpour, sharing his umbrella that barely covers one of them, let alone two. And somewhere between the gate and the garden, Jo March, who swore she'd never marry, who turned down a handsome rich boy because she loved her liberty too much, discovers that liberty isn't the opposite of love. It's the ground from which real love grows. I have nothing to give you but my heart in these empty hands, Friedrich says. Jo takes the hands. Not empty now. The rain falls harder. The umbrella blows inside out. Neither of them notices. And then Jo writes her book. Not the sensational potboilers that paid the bills. Not the picked robin of her first novel, trimmed to please everyone and satisfying no one. She writes the real book. The one about 4 sisters growing up in New England, about poverty and ambition and the terrible cost of growing older. About a girl who burned her sister's manuscript, and a girl who played invisible piano keys, and a girl who wanted silk dresses, and a girl who wanted something she couldn't name. She writes it from Beth's corner by the fire, with Beth's old writing desk on her knees and Beth's memory in every word. She doesn't try to be clever or shocking or important. She just tells the truth. And the truth, it turns out, is the most sensational story she's ever written. The book sells. The critics sneer. The readers weep. And Jo discovers what Marmee knew all along, that the stories that change the world are the ones that come from the place where it hurts the most. Apple-picking time at Plumfield, and the whole family gathers. What's left of it? What's grown from it? Meg brings the twins, who are enormous now, tumbling through the orchard like small tornadoes. Amy and Laurie arrive from their grand house looking prosperous and happy, their little daughter balanced on Laurie's shoulder. Jo presides over the chaos like a general. Her school is thriving, her books are selling, her boys are everywhere, and Friedrich stands beside her with his spectacles askew and his heart on his sleeve. Marmee sits in a chair beneath the apple tree, watching all of them with an expression that makes everyone who sees it go quiet for a moment. I can never wish you a greater happiness than this, she says. And there is one empty chair. No one sits in it, no one moves it, but everyone knows whose it is. Beth is here too, in the music drifting from an open window, in the gentleness that touches every face, in the silence between the laughter. The March family endures. Changed, scattered, broken and repaired, but whole. Jo writes sensation stories. She tells no one. Not her family, not even herself, not really. She writes about banditti and duchesses and poison and revenge and Mr. Krister. Dashwood at the Weekly Volcano pays her $25 apiece, and the money grows in a little hoard she's saving to take Beth to the mountains. She tells herself the stories are harmless. But she's changing, describing other people's passions until she can't quite feel her own clearly anymore, feeding heart and fancy on dangerous food, brushing the innocent bloom from her nature. She doesn't see it happening. But Professor Bear does. He never mentions it directly. He simply picks up a sensational paper one evening, glances at its lurid illustrations, and says with quiet disgust, "They have no right to put poison in the sugar plum." Jo sits very still, her cheeks burning. That night she rereads every story she's written, wearing the professor's moral spectacles now, and sees them for what they are. She stuffs the whole bundle into her stove and watches them burn. The demon of the juror goes up the chimney as a little black cinder with fiery eyes. She keeps the money. She almost wishes she hadn't any conscience. But she has one, and it's awake now. The winter ends, and Jo must go home. She's written no books and earned no fortune, but she's made a friend, the kind of friend that changes you without your knowing it, that rearranges the furniture of your soul so gradually you don't notice, until one day you look around and everything is different. At the station, early as it is, Buyer is there. He gives her violets, crushed and imperfect, bought from a street vendor with coins he could barely spare. She notices his hair is sticking straight up the way it does when he's troubled, and something in his face, something raw and undefended, makes her heart do something she doesn't yet have a name for. After she's gone, he sits in his room with his pipe and his Plato, and the tired, lonely look settles in like winter. "It is not for me," he says to the empty room. "I must not hope it now." He kisses the 2 little boys asleep in their bed, and turns back to his books. But I don't think the divine Plato was a very satisfactory substitute for what he really wanted. Laurie graduates with honors and gives the Latin oration, and everyone is proud. But Jo knows what's coming. She meets him in the grove the next morning, as promised, and he says it. All of it. The way young lovers do, headlong and desperate and choking on his own words. "I've loved you ever since I've known you, Jo. Couldn't help it. You've been so good to me." And she has to break him. She doesn't want to. She can see his eyes, wet and dark, looking up at her from the grass. She turns his head away gently, strokes the wavy hair he's grown long for her sake. How touching that is, and tells him the truth. They are not suited. Their quick tempers and strong wills would make them miserable. She cannot change what she feels, and it would be a lie to say she does when she doesn't. "Really, truly, Jo?" he asks, and catches both her hands. "Really, truly, dear." He lays his head on the mossy post of the stile and stands so still it frightens her. Then he turns away. "You'll be sorry some day, Jo." "Oh, where are you going?" to the devil, but he only goes to his boat and rows away hard, trying to outstrip a trouble that he carries in his heart. That evening, Laurie plays the Sonata Pathétique. Jo walks in the garden with Beth and for once understands music better than her sister, every note a cry she caused. He plays stormily, tries to get through it, but in a momentary lull, Marmie's voice drifts from the house. "Jo, dear, come in, I want you," just what Laurie longs to say, with a different meaning. The music ends with a broken chord. His grandfather finds him sitting in the dark, puts both hands on the broad shoulders and says gently, "I know, my boy, I know. The old man has been through it before, once himself, once with Laurie's father, and because he is wise and kind and a little afraid of what young heartbreak can do, he offers the only medicine he has. I'll go with you," he says, "anywhere in the world." And Laurie, whose heart feels entirely broken and the world a howling wilderness, takes the old man's hand and lets himself be led away. Jo takes Beth to the seashore, hoping salt air and sunshine will do what love alone cannot. They are all in all to each other there. The strong sister and the feeble one always together, and people who watch them seem to know instinctively that a long separation is not far away. One day Jo sits looking at her sister, trying to find signs of hope in the faint color on Beth's cheeks. But the cheeks are very thin, and the hands seem too feeble to hold even the little pink shells they've been gathering. Beth opens her eyes and looks up with such tenderness there is hardly need to say the words. "Jo, dear, I'm glad you know it. I've tried to tell you, but I couldn't. And then, because she has carried this knowledge alone for so long, I've known it for a good while, dear, and now I'm used to it. It isn't hard to think of or to bear. Jo does not cry. She never cries when most deeply moved, but her arms tighten around this dearest treasure. Beth says it gently, the way the sea says things. It's like the tide, Jo, when it turns it goes slowly, but it can't be stopped. A little gray sandbird comes tripping close, peeping softly. Beth smiles at it. She tells Jo she is the gull, strong and wild, fond of the storm. And Beth is the peep, Quaker-colored, always near the shore, chirping its contented little song. Jo leans down and kisses the tranquil face, and with that silent kiss dedicates herself, soul, and body to Beth. On Christmas Day in Nice, a tall young man walks the Promenade des Anglais. He looks Italian, dresses English, and has the independent air of an American. He glances at blonde girls and ladies in blue without much interest, until a little basket carriage comes trotting down the street, driven by a young woman with yellow hair and bright eyes and a parasol whip she handles with considerable style. It's Amy. She drops the reins and holds out both hands, and his whole face wakes up. "Oh, Laurie, is it really you? I thought you'd never come. They are not the children they were." Amy has grown into something poised and purposeful, and Laurie. Well, Laurie has grown into something she doesn't entirely approve of, though she's glad enough to see him. They drive to Castle Hill and feed the peacocks, and it feels, for both of them, like finding a piece of home in a foreign country. Neither of them knows yet what this meeting will become. But the reader sees it. Two people who have been hurt by the same household beginning to heal each other as naturally as breathing. Amy takes Laurie to Valrosa, the Garden of Roses, and while he lounges on the terrace railing she sketches him and calls him Lazy Lawrence. Then she lectures him, properly, thoroughly, the way Jo never could, because Amy doesn't shout. She is cool and calm and devastating. Because with every chance for being good, useful, and happy, you are faulty, lazy, and miserable. She tells him he has wasted 6 months and disappointed everyone. She tells him talent isn't genius, and she's given up her own grand ambitions, so what's his excuse? And when the words cut deep enough that his eyes fill and she sees the ring Jo gave him hidden in the grass, she softens, but doesn't stop. She shows him 2 sketches. The first, Lazy Lawrence as he is now, listless, half asleep, a cigar trailing smoke around his dreaming head. The second, the boy she remembers, taming a horse, every line alive with energy and courage. He looks at both. He says nothing, but Amy sees him flush and fold his lips, and that satisfies her. The next morning, instead of his usual call, she gets a note. Lazy Lawrence has gone to his grandpa, like the best of boys. She smiles. And then she looks around the empty room and sighs. Yes, I am glad, but how I shall miss him. When the family accepts the inevitable, they do what the Marches have always done. They make the best room beautiful and fill it with love. Beth's sunny chamber gathers everything she treasures, father's books, mother's easy-chair, Joe's desk, Amy's finest sketches. Every day Meg brings the babies to make sunshine for Auntie Beth. And there she sits, tranquil and busy as ever, making mittens for cold purple hands passing below her window, pen wipers for small boys struggling with pothooks, until the school children think of her as a fairy godmother. The first months are happy ones. Beth looks around and says, "How beautiful this is." But then the needle grows so heavy, and she puts it down forever. Talking wearies her. Tane claims her. There are days of help me, that break every heart in the house. And then the rebellion passes, and the old peace returns, deeper than before. Joe never leads her. She sleeps on a couch in the room, waking to tend the fire, to feed and lift the patient creature who tries not to be a trouble. Often she wakes to find Beth reading her well-worn Pilgrim's Progress, or singing softly to beguile the sleepless night, or leaning her face on transparent fingers while slow tears drop through. And Joe lies watching, with thoughts too deep for tears, understanding at last what Beth's life has been, uneventful, unambitious, yet full of the genuine virtues that smell sweet and blossom in the dust. One night Beth finds a poem tucked into the pages of her book, written in Joe's hand, the lines blurred where tears have fallen. "My Beth," it begins. The sister who never wanted to go anywhere, who never made plans about growing up, who was content to be stupid little Beth trotting about at home. She is the one who teaches them all what courage looks like when it's quiet. She is the first pilgrim called, and the fittest. And they wait with her on the shore, trying to see the shining ones coming to receive her when she crosses the river. The spring comes. The sky clears, the earth greens, the flowers are up fair and early, and the birds come back in time to say goodbye to Beth. She clings to the hands that have led her all her life, as father and mother guide her tenderly through the valley of the shadow. Seldom, except in books, do the dying utter memorable words or depart with beatified countenances. As Beth had hoped, the tide goes out easily. In the dark hour before the dawn, on the bosom where she drew her first breath, she quietly draws her last, with no farewell but one loving look, one little sigh. When morning comes, for the first time in many months the fire is out. Joe's place is empty. The room is very still. But a bird sings blithely on a budding bough close by, the snowdrops blossom freshly at the window, and the spring sunshine streams in like a benediction over the placid face upon the pillow. A face so full of painless peace that those who love it best smile through their tears. And thank God that Beth is well at last. In Vienna, Laurie tries to compose a requiem that will harrow up Joe's soul. But the sorrow is too vast, or music too ethereal, and every time he reaches a plaintive passage he finds himself humming a dancing tune from the Christmas ball at Nice. He tries an opera, but when he casts Joe as the heroine, memory betrays him, showing her beating mats with her head in a bandana, or throwing cold water over his passion. An irresistible laugh ruins the pensive picture. So he gives Joe up and lets another phantom in, one with golden hair and blue ribbons and roses. He doesn't name her, but he knows. After hearing Mozart performed at the Royal Theatre, he looks over his own work, stares at the busts of Mendelssohn and Beethoven and Bach, and slowly tears his music sheets to pieces. "She is right," he says. "Talent isn't genius. And you can't make it so." He puts Joe's letters in a locked drawer, takes off the little ring, and lays it with them, and when he writes to Amy, the letter goes very soon, and is promptly answered. The news of Beth reaches Amy in Vevey, and she bears it as well as she can. But her heart is heavy, and every day she sits in the old chateau garden by the lake, looking wistfully across the water, waiting for Laurie to come. He does come. The moment he reads the letter, he packs his knapsack, says goodbye to his walking companions, and is off. He finds her sitting on the low wall by the chestnuts, leaning her head on her hand, with blotted letters in her lap and a black ribbon tying up her hair. He stands in the archway, seeing what no one has seen before, the tender side of Amy's character. And then she looks up, and everything is said. She runs to him, and the words come out in a tone of unmistakable love. "Oh, Laurie, Laurie, I knew you'd come to me." He bends his dark head over her light one, and they stand quite silent for a moment. She feels that no one could comfort her so well. He decides that Amy is the only woman in the world who could fill Joe's place. Neither speaks it. Both know it. It happens on the lake, at noonday, in a few blunt words. They have been floating all morning past Chillon and Clarence, talking of Bonnivard and Rousseau, each privately wondering if their own love story is half as interesting. Amy dabbles her hand in the water. When she looks up, Laurie is leaning on his oars with an expression in his eyes that makes her say something, anything, just to fill the silence. He takes an oar beside her. They row together, 2 oars keeping time, the boat gliding smooth through the water. "How well we pull together, don't we?" she says. And Laurie, with all the tenderness he has, answers, "So well that I wish we might always pull in the same boat." "Will you, Amy?" Very low, "Yes, Laurie." Then they both stop rowing, and add a pretty little tableau of human love and happiness to the dissolving views reflected in the lake. Joe is all alone. Beth's chair is empty, the house feels dark, and she promised to be everything to father and mother, but the ache never stops. She wakes at night crying, "Oh, Beth, come back!" and her mother is there, quick to hear the sobbing as she was quick to hear Beth's faintest whisper. Sacred moments, heart talking to heart in the silence of the night. She goes to her father and says humbly, "Talk to me as you did to Beth. I need it more than she did, for I'm all wrong." And slowly, painfully, she begins to learn. She finds herself humming Beth's songs while she sweeps, imitating Beth's orderly ways, keeping things fresh and cozy without knowing why. One day Marmee says, "Why don't you write?" and Joe gets out her desk. Something goes into that story. Truth, humor, pathos, something that was never there before. Her father sends it to a magazine. It's paid for. Letters come. And Joe, bewildered, says, "I don't understand it." Her father says, "There is truth in it, Joe. You wrote with no thought of fame or money, and put your heart into it. Taught by love and sorrow, she has found her style at last." Up in the garret, Joe finds 4 little wooden chests in a row, or each marked with its owner's name in childish letters, each filled with relics of a childhood that is over now for all of them. She opens hers, turns over old exercise books and dried flowers and ribbons from forgotten parties, and relives that winter at Mrs. Kirk's boarding house when everything began to change. She smiles at some memories, then looks thoughtful, then sad, and when she finds a little message tucked into a book of fairy tales, written in the professor's careful hand, her lips begin to tremble. "Wait for me, my friend. I may be a little late, but I shall surely come." She holds the paper tight against her chest. "Oh, if he only would," she whispers to the empty attic in the rain. "Everyone seems going away from me, and I'm all alone." And she lays her head on a comfortable rag bag and cries. While the rain patters on the roof above, and somewhere, far away across the ocean, a man who is not forgotten is already packing his trunk. They come home. Laurie appears like a ghost in the twilight, a substantial, lifelike ghost, leaning over the sofa where Joe lies. "Oh, my Teddy! Oh, my Teddy!" She flies up and hugs him. "Where's Amy? Your mother has got her down at Meg's." We stopped there, by the way, and there was no getting my wife out of their clutches. "His what?" "Oh, the Dickens. He's married." "And there it is at last. I'll believe it, with all my heart," Joe tells him. "But, Teddy, we never can be boy and girl again. The happy old times can't come back, and we mustn't expect it. We are man and woman now." He takes her hand and lays his face on it, feeling that out of the grave of a boyish passion there has risen a beautiful, strong friendship. Then Amy comes in, singing Beth's songs with a tender music the best master could not have taught, and the clear voice fails at the last line, "Earth hath no sorrow that heaven cannot heal." The little chair stands in its old place. The tidy basket still holds the work she left unfinished, and above the piano, Beth's face smiles down, seeming to say, "Be happy, I am here." Joe stands in the doorway watching the family vanish upstairs. Everyone is paired off now. Everyone but her. She has just decided to weep a little weep when she goes to bed, when there comes a knock at the porch door. She opens it, and there he is, a tall, bearded gentleman, beaming from the darkness like a midnight sun. "Oh, Mr. Bear, I am so glad to see you," she cries with a clutch, as if the night might swallow him up before she can get him in. He's wearing a new suit of black, his hair has been cut and smoothly brushed, and he has gold sleeve buttons in his immaculate wristbands. Dear old fellow, Joe thinks. He couldn't have got himself up with more care if he'd been going a-wooing. And that sudden thought, born of the words, makes her blush so dreadfully that she drops her knitting ball and dives after it, just as the professor drops his metaphorical torch and dives after it too. They bump heads, see stars, and come up laughing. And somewhere in the room little Demi asks the professor with devastating innocence, "Do great boys like great girls too, Fessor?" It happens in the rain, on a muddy street, amid the pickle factories and wholesale leather concerns where no sensible woman would go shopping. Joe has put on her new bonnet and come downtown hoping to see the professor, though she'd die before admitting it. The crimson bow is already flecked with black from the rain, and she has forgotten her umbrella. Then a somewhat dilapidated blue one appears above the unprotected bonnet, and looking up, she sees Mr. Bear looking down. They walk together through the errands, the silesia that should be twilled, the wrong change, the lavender ribbon asked for, the calico counter. He tells her he has a position at a college, out west. So far away, she says, and her skirts go to their fate, because nothing matters now. But then, on the muddy street, with a pot of daisies and pockets full of grapes, he stops. Heart's dearest, why do you cry? And Jo, who should say she has a cold, answers with an irrepressible sob, because you are going away. Jo, I have nothing but much love to give you. Can you make a little place in your heart for old Fritz? Oh, yes, and she folds both hands over his arm, and they walk on under the old umbrella, perfectly happy, quite oblivious to the deepening dusk and fog. It was certainly proposing under difficulties, for he could not go on his knees on account of the mud, but fortunately Mr. Bear considered her the most beautiful woman living, and she found him more Jove-like than ever, though his hat-brim dripped and every finger of his gloves needed mending. She kisses her Friedrich on the steps, under the umbrella, in the rain. It is dreadful, dreadful and wonderful and exactly right. She would have done it if the flock of draggle-tailed sparrows on the hedge had been human beings, for she is very far gone indeed. This woman who swore she would never marry, who turned down a fortune and a handsome face because she loved her liberty too much. And yet here she stands, choosing freely, choosing fully, choosing a man who offers nothing but his heart and his battered umbrella and his absolute belief that she is worth crossing an ocean for. And then, turning from the night and storm and loneliness to the household light and warmth and peace waiting to receive them, with a glad, "Welcome home!" Jo leads her lover in and shuts the door. The March family makes room for one more. It always does. 5 years later, on a mellow October day, they are all at Plumfield for the apple-picking. Jo's school is full of boys, slow boys and bashful boys, feeble boys and riotous ones, boys that lisp and boys that stutter, and a merry little quadroon who was welcome where others wouldn't take him. The professor charges up and down the green aisles like a stout Teutonic knight with a pole for a lance. Laurie, steady, sensible, doing heaps of good with his money, carries his small daughter in a bushel basket. Amy sketches the groups, watching over one pale lad with a crutch beside him. Meg sits among the apple piles like Pomona herself, her tall Demi beside her. And Jo rushes about with her gown pinned up, her hat anywhere but on her head, baby Teddy tucked under one arm, exactly as she always was, restless, magnificent, free. Under the festival tree, with the boys scattered and the supper done, Marmee sits among her daughters. They remember their castles in the air. Meg wanted a lovely house and John and dear children, and she has them and is the happiest woman in the world. Amy wanted to be a great artist. Instead, she models a figure of her baby, and Laurie says it's the best thing she's ever done. Jo wanted to write a good book, and she can wait now, for her life is giving her the experiences to fill it. I do think that families are the most beautiful things in all the world, she says in her old impetuous way. And Marmee, touched to the heart, stretches out her arms as if to gather children and grandchildren to herself. These 4 girls who were playing pilgrims in the parlor what seems like yesterday, and says with a face full of motherly love, "Oh, my girls! However long you may live, I never can wish you a greater happiness than this." Why do we still read about the March sisters more than a century and a half after Louisa May Alcott put down her pen? Because they are us, not metaphorically, literally. Every woman who has ever felt too loud for the room she's in sees herself in Jo. Every woman who has wanted beautiful things and then felt ashamed of wanting them recognizes Meg. Every woman who has measured herself against someone else's genius and found herself wanting knows Amy's quiet devastation in front of the Raphael. And every family has a Beth, the one who holds everyone together so gently that no one notices the weight she's carrying until she can't carry it any more. Alcott didn't create characters, she created mirrors. 4 mirrors angled slightly differently, each reflecting a different face of what it means to be a woman trying to become herself in a world that has already decided what she should be. The reason the book endures is not literary. It's personal. You don't read Little Women. You remember it. The great tension at the heart of Little Women is the one Alcott herself never resolved. Jo wants independence. She wants to write, to travel, to stride through the world on her own terms. But she also wants love, family, connection, the warmth of a fire with people she belongs to. The novel asks whether these desires are compatible, and its answer is complicated, honest, and perhaps more radical than it first appears. Alcott's readers wanted Jo to marry Laurie. Alcott refused, partly because she didn't believe Jo and Laurie would actually make each other happy, and partly because she wanted to show that a woman's story doesn't have to end with a handsome boy from next door. But she also refused to leave Jo alone. Professor Bear is not a romantic hero. He's a partner. He doesn't sweep Jo off her feet. He meets her where she stands and walks beside her. The marriage Alcott imagines for Jo is not a retreat from independence, but an expansion of it, a partnership of equals who make each other braver, not smaller. That so many readers still argue about whether Jo should have married Laurie proves that Alcott succeeded in making the question matter more than any answer. Beth dies because she was good. This is the hardest truth in the novel, and Alcott doesn't flinch from it. Beth went to the Hummels because her sisters were too busy, too tired, too caught up in their own lives. She went because someone had to, and Beth was always the someone. Her goodness was not rewarded, it was lethal. And yet the novel doesn't present this as irony or injustice. It presents it as the cost of a certain kind of life, the life lived for others, the life that never counts its own needs, the life that burns so gently you don't notice it's consuming itself until the flame is out. Beth is the moral center of the book, precisely because she asks for nothing. In a story full of ambitions, Jo's writing, Amy's art, Meg's domestic dreams, is to stay home and love the people in front of her. That this is presented as both the most admirable and the most dangerous way to live is Alcott's most unsettling insight. Goodness without self-preservation is a form of slow sacrifice, and the world will accept every ounce of it without ever asking if you can afford to give. Louisa May Alcott was Jo. Not loosely, not approximately. She was Jo, the way a photograph is its subject. The same temper, the same restless ambition, the same garret full of manuscripts, the same determination to earn her family's bread with her pen. Alcott's father, Bronson, was a transcendentalist philosopher whose beautiful ideas couldn't pay the bills, just as Mr. March's principled chaplaincy left his family in genteel poverty. Alcott's sister Lizzie died young of scarlet fever, just like Beth. Alcott herself went to Washington as a Civil War nurse and nearly died of typhoid, carrying the physical damage for the rest of her life. She wrote Little Women in 6 weeks, under pressure from her publisher, and she didn't particularly like it. "I plod away," she wrote in her journal, "though I don't enjoy this sort of thing." The book that would make her famous and define American girlhood for generations was, to its author, merely a bill-paying exercise, the latest in a long line of stories written not from inspiration, but from necessity. The irony is pure. Jo March, the most honest thing she ever wrote, was the book she wrote for money. The March household is a nation in miniature. 4 citizens with radically different temperaments trying to live together under a shared moral constitution. Meg is the conservative, honoring tradition, choosing stability, building her life within the boundaries she was given. Jo is the revolutionary, chafing against every rule, demanding that the world make room for her on her own terms. Amy is the diplomat, learning to navigate social structures with grace while quietly reshaping them from within. And Beth is the saint, the one whose goodness holds the community together not through law or argument, but through the simple, inexhaustible force of kindness. Marmee is the founder, the lawgiver, the one who established the principles by which this small republic operates. Work hard, give generously, forgive quickly, and never let the sun go down on your anger. What makes Little Women revolutionary is not that it tells a political story. It's that it shows how politics begins at home, in the daily negotiations of 4 people who love each other fiercely and disagree about almost everything. Every nation starts as a family. Every family is a rehearsal for the world. Every generation of women writers has had to wrestle with Little Women. Some embrace it, finding in its pages the first story that told them their inner life mattered. Others rebel against it, seeing in Beth's death a warning about the cost of female self-sacrifice, in Jo's marriage a capitulation to convention. Both readings are correct. That is the book's genius. It holds contradiction without resolving it, the way life does. A woman can want independence and love. A woman can be fierce and gentle. A woman can sacrifice everything for her family and still not be sure it was enough. Alcott wrote the book that would echo through every subsequent story about women coming of age, from Jane Eyre to the Bell Jar, from Anne of Green Gables to My Brilliant Friend. She gave us a vocabulary for the particular ache of being female in a world that hasn't decided what it wants from you. She gave us Jo, who is still running through the pages, hat flying off, manuscript under her arm, refusing to walk when she can run, refusing to whisper when she can shout, refusing to be less than everything she is. The book ends where all great books end, not with an answer, but with a life still being lived, still unfinished, still becoming.